Starting, we're live. Boom, we're gone. I just had multiple booms. I've been slowly preparing and building up. It is good to see you, sir.
It's good to see you, my friend.
First time in a month. The mic is a little bit far away. I've got to position that better, but if I put it on the desk, it vibrates. But your sound, as always, sounds awesome.
Well, thank you.
And awesome to see. Great crowd in for the show as usual, and all the new functionality, actually. And I'm kind of curious, actually, to see this go live. I'm waiting for the screen to update, but
there we are.
There's all these new features at the moment. They've updated the player. They've updated the countdown, which many people say the highlight of my live shows is the actual countdown before the show, and that's been upgraded.
The countdown and then the delay before you go live.
That's right. I like to build tension. It's like the Rolling Stones. How you don't just come out exactly on the dot. You're not a train. You need the crowd to build up expectation, or even if it's unintentional. So yes, we're live, and it is a great crowd. It's great to see all you guys again, and it's been an awesome. Well, I don't know if you'd say awesome. News is never really awesome, is it? News is generally kind of depressing. Let's face it.
Well, no, I would take back and say there are some great stories out there. I had the opportunity to speak with a researcher this past month. A great story that wasn't conflict driven or any controversy about it. It was just a good, interesting story. So it's not all, it all doesn't bleed or lead.
Really, I lose faith at times. I'm very interested to hear in that, but it has been an interesting month, and there's certainly a very interesting month and time coming up, of course, with the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II happening
next weekend.
Yeah. So, as usual, being in a part of the world that's completely put World War II behind it and really doesn't have any real anything to do with
There's nothing new to talk about. Not at all.
Not at all. Although I really sincerely wish there wasn't anything to talk about. But thankfully there is, so we have a show.
Yes. Multiple topics.
Yeah. So you've been rocking the podcast, and for everybody, you should already know this by now, of course. But you've got the Asia News Weekly podcast, which is available
everywhere. So you can go to on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn. The video versions up on YouTube. AsiaNewsWeekly.net has all the links there.
And what I like is you do like the full shows, but you also do little bite-sized segments like on the videos and stuff like that, so people can kind of hear you talk about specific topics as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll put the whole show out there, which is about 45 minutes to an hour in length. And then each of the main stories will break out and have their own individual video for that, as well as beginning next week when the podcast returns, usually in the Asia Brief section of the podcast, there's about 10 stories. So instead of uploading the full Asia Brief as a standalone, I'll actually parse those out as well. So each end of the individual 10 stories will also have a video.
Yeah. And that's, I think, also good because people sometimes, one, it gives people a taste of what's actually inside, and they can see topics which are interesting, which I see myself sometimes. And, it's very accessible. So, if you're not already, you should obviously be subscribed to, everything. It's almost impossible not. Is there anything that you're not on?
I tried to be on as much as possible. The main platforms that are able that help people consume media easily. Some platforms are just too difficult. Yeah, it's just not worth time. Yeah, but the main podcast platforms, I am there.
Okay. So, by the way, Sean Bro mentions that you smashed a huge amount of noodles a few weeks ago. I don't know what he means by smashed, actually. What's this? What's he talking about?
Oh, okay. So in South Korea, so we're using Google Hangout on Air.
That's right.
Live streaming video. Of course, we all know Ustream, which is another big player in this space. But in South Korea, there's a homegrown startup called Africa TV.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Anyone can broadcast for free is what it's supposed to be, but Africa TV. So africatv.com is the Korean version, but they've just started out a new global service. So trying to compete with Ustream and Google Hangout on Air for the live streaming type blog TV type stuff that was out today. So last month they had an event in which they called the Hunger Games, and they invited 4 prominent South Korean video people, mainly YouTube people, to come on down to their studios about 20 kilometers away from here and participate in an hour-long event in which we had to complete challenges while eating bulldog bokkeumyeong, which is the spicy fire noodles. And each container was 425 calories, a good big bowl of ramen type size thing. Yeah. And I managed to plow through 5 in the hour.
Dang. Wow. And so, I mean, that I can see that being challenging in multiple ways.
It was challenging. There were a couple of things that I had to do along the way that were, slowing me down as I was doing that as well. But it was a lot of fun, and got to meet a lot of folks on the interwebs around the world who tuned in and helped cheer me on to victory, ultimate victory. You won? Did you win? Yeah. There were 2 contests. One was who could eat the most, and I ate the most. And then the second piece of that was Africa TV uses a star gift system in which those that use the system can later on redeem the stars that they are given for cash.
Okay, so you won on all counts.
I didn't win on all counts. There was a very famous person who was in the lineup as well, and she just destroyed everybody with stars. But my goal was to destroy everyone's stomach and eat the most. Wow! And I succeeded in that endeavor.
I spent last week being taken around Dalian, China, by your probable long lost Chinese twin, who was also an incredible eater. And it's kind of funny. I don't know. I'm sure it's probably the same in Korea. Certainly from Japan, there are so many food safety news stories that come out of China, and the food supply in Japan is now so connected to China. If you eat out in Japan, if you go, and this is where it comes out, people don't realize until one of these scandals happens, but if you go to McDonald's or you go to a restaurant or whatever, the vegetables, the chicken McNuggets, they all come from China. And there are these periodic, for the news that comes out of China, unfortunately, it's almost always bad news. And there are a lot of food safety stories. So I had a paranoid wife and myself. I'd kind of work myself up. Is the air going to kill me? Is the food going to kill me? And so I went over there with some trepidation. But I was introduced by this guy who insisted not only having me eat everything that we saw in China, but also that I had to order quadruple portions. I mean, literally on the first day, he asked immediately after we went out for lunch, and I ate so much I had to leave food, which is okay in China, which has also helped me out. But until I was completely stuffed, we went out walking, and within 10 minutes, he saw McDonald's. And he says, "You want to try some ice cream?" And I was like, "Well, I'm actually still quite full." I was, "I'll get you some ice cream. They're just small ones." And he went and got those soft cones from McDonald's, and he came over he gave me 4. And I actually got kind of angry. I got like, "Well, dude, I'm not sure I can even eat 1. Why did you get 4?" He's like, "Oh, they're just small. It's tiny. You can eat them." I put on 3 kilos last week.
Oh my gosh!
And it was actually, I gotta say, Dalian, the food is awesome. It was really good.
Does not surprise me.
Yeah, it was every day, even the basic stuff. I don't know. I was well looked after anyway. And so I did my own little non-broadcast mukbang all of last week, which I couldn't broadcast because, of course, no Google services, Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud, anything. I like to say that China is a big digital Betty Ford clinic. I mean, seriously, if she ever thinks about opening up a digital clinic, she should open one in China.
Yeah.
For non-Chinese speakers, anyway. If you speak Chinese, it's fine. But apart from that, it's actually, it was really eye-opening actually getting to spend a proper amount of time and not being, I was there a couple of weeks ago just for a training thing where I was just like in a hotel doing training the whole time. So I wasn't really there, but I actually spent a pretty solid week being looked after. So it was kind of interesting. And as I was mentioning before, I've actually got this problem. The one biggest hangover, apart from the 3 kilos I put on in China, is the fact that halfway through the week, one of the guys on the team that I work with there, they all speak Japanese, is a Chinese guy but of some Korean heritage. And he said, "Hey, Hiko, you want to go to a North Korean restaurant?" And I was like, yeah, that sounds interesting. Sure, I'm up for that. And he said, we'll take you out. And so he took me out to one of these, and it's actually North Korean. It's called the Pyongyang building.
Guan, yeah. I saw the picture. So Pyongyang Guan.
Yeah. Pyongyang Kan in Japanese, but that's right. And you go inside, and it's literally got. I mean, in Japanese, they know these people, the entertainers. I don't know this for certain. I wasn't able to verify this much, but they talk about the Yorokobi Gumi, which is the government entertainers. You know, the beautiful young women who just dance and sing for the elites of North Korea. Right? You've heard it. What are these called?
Oh yeah, you have it right. You have it right.
What are they called?
Well, I mean, I don't know the exact name, but from what you said, it's close to what it should be. Yeah. Yeah.
In Japanese, they call them Yorokobigumi, which literally means the group of people that give joy. The restaurant is full of these beautiful, articulate, and musically talented, people who also serve as waitresses. You can also talk to, who I was talking through with the Chinese people. I haven't edited the video that I took there yet, but they actually also restrict how you can take photos. You can take photos and video of the performance that they do, the musical performance, but you're not supposed to record or photograph the waitresses or talk to them or record talking to them, which I kind of inadvertently did. But then she mentioned partway through, you're not allowed to video anything. And the guys were asking, it was kind of fascinating, like how they asked it, like, so how much do you get paid? It's like, we don't get paid. They pay us after we go home. I was like, how long are you here for? She said, well, they're 3-year postings. We're not allowed to go home at all during the 3-year posting. But because there's some trouble or something back home, she was supposed to go back 6 months ago, but it keeps getting delayed and she doesn't know when she can go back. But they don't pay them so that they can't escape.
Right.
So lovely lady, and we got to have a really good chat with her and everything. But damn, that's the real thing. But the thing is, as I was saying before this, and I'm sure this is a North Korean brainwashing plot. I have had that they play this like pop tune, and it's really catchy. This North Korean pop tune, they're singing and dancing, and it's like a really old fashioned Japanese pop type thing. And man, the chorus for that song has just been in a loop in my head ever since I left that restaurant. Even now, I can hear it playing in my head. I haven't heard any music probably since I left there, and it's really catchy. I would go and buy that CD if they probably sell cassettes, I guess.
I'm sure they have digital copies now.
They probably do. It was eye-opening. I mean, yes, because North Korea is a bit like a cartoon show almost from Japan. It got so big after the abduction thing that Japanese TV was paying crazy money to go and just get anything from North Korean TV or anyone talking about anything from North Korea. And there was a time where just 24-hour Japanese TV was nothing but North Korean stuff, including all of the stuff which I kind of saw for the first time live. But one thing I think what China taught me, I think there's still a perception, certainly no question, even Chinese themselves, they recognize 20, 30 years ago, China was not unlike what North Korea, is now or has been in recent years. And, they've moved on a lot. But what I realized when I was there, spending a lot of time hanging out, talking very openly with a lot of Chinese people, is that where you tend to, when everything that you see is controlled and you tend to assume everyone inside that the people are controlled. And of course, what you find out with China is that it opens up and you get to exchange more, is that no, the people were never controlled, and the people see everything just as clearly as we see everything from the outside, actually. But, the government can control the perception of how that's seen, even by us. And you have to always remember that people are people, and that, they probably understand the BS way better than we do. And I'm sure that's the case with North Korea as well. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be fascinating when they have the chance to open up. And we're going to find that out.
Yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later, but I'm gonna hold my breath on that.
No. So as the man really covering all the news, what's been catching your attention the most in the last month from the region?
There's been so much. I mean, since you're in Japan, let's start with security bills that were rammed through the diet. Oh,
they ran through the lower house.
Lower house.
But not the upper house yet. And again, they're doing this dance. This idea that they're supposed to spend a certain amount of time deliberating. So they're just sitting there looking at their watch. I'm just going to keep talking about this until mid-September, when that should be enough. At which point it will be the longest debated bill in Japanese history. beating the previously longest debated bill in history, which was the 1963 previous security law, which established a security treaty with the United States, which actually triggered a decade of riots, founded the Japan Red Army movement, closed most of the universities in Japan, and was done by Abe Shinzo's father. So we're doing part 2 of that. And again, the thing is that of course the government has the numbers. Theoretically, they don't have to debate anything. They could just do a show of hands any second and pass it, and it would be irrefutable law. But just because it's such a controversial law, they are trying to do the perceived right thing.
But you bring up an interesting point. Do they actually have the numbers? Because they have the numbers in the lower house, but in the upper house they don't necessarily do. They don't have the 2/3.
They don't need 2/3, not to pass a law, not to pass the security law. They need that for the Constitution.
For the Constitution, but I mean, all the security law is doing is we reinterpret Article 9.
Well, but okay, so this is an important point. Everyone seems to be very focused on what the intention of the Taste 1962. I'm not anti-American at all. I am the most pro-American guy you'll ever meet. But here's the thing with the security law. Everyone is very focused on the intent behind it, on what Abe is trying to do. And Abe is trying to, by stealth, increase the status of the military and the freedom of the military to do various things, which increases the risk of Japan getting entangled in some sort of conflict and ending up in a war again. And that's what people are against, and that's how people describe the law. But in terms of what the content of the law is, and
the content of the law is great. I mean, I'm all for it. I think this is something that should be a no-brainer. But I guess the issue is that when you look at constitutional scholars, so I would say there's two problems. There's two problems. One, you have a group that feels that the path that Abe is taking is unconstitutional. And then you have the other camp that just wants to maintain a pacifist stance and doesn't want anything to change.
Yeah, well, which are more or less the same thing as well. I mean, even within all the opposition and the wealth of public opposition, I mean, Abe has been on a very high approval rating the entire time that he's been in government, because he's been focused on Abenomics and the economy. And the moment that the conversation has changed, as long as this law is being debated, his
it's going down. Because when he first announced this, I thought it was going to be a super slam dunk. His approval rating was 70% or so. Now it's tanked down to the 40%.
Yeah, it's like the disapproval's gone above 50. All of a sudden, and it's kind of funny. The most damaging thing that happened was his own university scholar experts that he called in for on a totally unrelated law, where an opposition lawmaker inadvertently. And the thing was, until that point in this whole debate process, even the Democrats and everyone before them had been kind of jumbling together a similar sort of a law. The whole idea is even the Democrats are for Japan participating in more UN peacekeeping and kind of normalizing Japan more. But when they got these scholars to kind of out of the blue, and these were pro-government appointed scholars, and they kind of surprised everyone by having 3 of them suddenly say that they thought this other law was unconstitutional, then that just flipped everything. And that is also what made it okay for the public. Like even the people who supported the government is like
to back away.
Yeah, it's like, well, wait a minute, he's going too far, and he should be backing off this, and we'll stop. And even today, just in front of the train station coming home, the Japanese Communist Party was having a rally, and they were just saying that basically, we've gone perfectly well the last 70 years, not getting into any single war, and why would we do anything to increase the danger of that happening or risk that? I mean, they were being very pragmatic, but that's exactly, that's what appeals to. You don't have to be a communist to actually, to sympathize with that sentiment, that why fix anything that isn't broken, that's kept us out of wars, even though the actual principle of what they're trying to do is fine.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've said from day one, the biggest mistake Abe and the LDP did with this is they packaged it wrong and sold it wrong. They didn't explain it in a way that made sense.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, so lately Abe has tried to explain it. So there was a big deal that he went on TV. He asked to go on TV, and he got this kind of a house on fire. He's trying to show like firefighters and helping each other out or whatever. And it looked strange because the smoke looked like meat, which everyone seemed to focus on. But the thing is, the point that he was trying to make and the illustration he was trying to make, again, it was completely reasonable. But as you say, he's just done a bad job of communicating it. And frankly, most people don't want to listen to it. I mean.
Well, yeah, and see, that's the shame too, because if you just sit down and look at the component parts, and you see what the limitations are, what the goal of the new legislation is supposed to be, it doesn't change a whole lot, and it makes so much more sense for the status of the region.
But there are some funny things. So again, I mean, the opposition has endless time to pick holes in this legislation and to pick holes in the government. And the government is, the more that they talk, the more that they show that, frankly, they're just trying to use this as a way to just do whatever they want afterwards, right? And, I think there is no question after this law, if there were another Iraq invasion or, something like that, that Japan would be more directly involved. I mean, that is clearly the whole intent.
Well, even today they came out and said that, hey, if this passes, we could actually carry some nukes for some of our allies. I'm sure that's going to go over very well.
I didn't hear that one. They could carry nukes?
Oh, yeah. So the change of the law, because that would be like another form of logistical support of transporting weapons.
Oh, no. Well, that's what the point I was about to say. So the thing today, they didn't mention nukes in what I heard, although nukes is that's another escalation. But there was a talk about the law would allow them to carry ammunition for their allies. And I'm thinking of the Korean unit in Africa about this.
True, last year, yeah.
But it would clarify that they're allowed to carry munitions. And the opposition kind of asked, so by this, let's just be clear, you don't intend this to mean missiles, for example, to carry missiles for other people. And the Ministry of Defense got up and says, no, we don't think of missiles as weapons. We think of them as munitions. So,
it's big booms.
It's getting very, very fuzzy. They're mighty big bullets you've got there, sir, and they don't even need a gun to shoot. So, you can see every time they talk, they fire munitions at their own feet. And it's killing them. And, the fact that they've promised to draw this out and do this until September, it's going to really, and, the security treaty under Abe's dad, and everyone's saying this could very well, the way things are going, you would have said he was invincible 2 months ago, right? Based on polls and everything, you couldn't see a way that Abe would come out of power. And all of a sudden now he's heading towards, Taro Aso type ratings.
Yeah, but still, if you look at all the other opposition parties, they still don't have their act together. So he's got a lot of wiggle room.
Well, he's still, but the thing, but this has always been the case for the last 7 years. Apart from the two blips of opposition parties actually getting in, it's always about factions within the LDP, fighting and taking over from one another. So what might be interesting is that the crash in poll ratings might embolden some young Turks within the LDP party to make a leadership challenge. And that's the way it happens, 90% of the time here.
Right.
Speaking of opposition, ineffective opposition, and if I may say so, slightly ineffective president, the Japan leader of the opposition met with President Park yesterday.
Oh, yes. Oh, God.
Historic meeting. Yeah, I really don't know what either of them had to talk about. But I have to come back. You sent me a link, which I couldn't read till after I got back from China. So here's the thing. I'm from Japan, and I always kind of hope. I hope both sides. I hope that Japan has PMs who are, kind of China and kind of Korea friendly and willing to make things up, and like Prime Minister Murayama did in the 90s. And at the same time, I always hope that Korea and China get kind of Japan-friendly leaders. I want everyone to be nice with each other. And when I heard that Park was going to be president, well, she's a conservative. Her father is the most crazy Japanophile president leader Korea's ever had. And I was thinking, great, this is someone we have a crazy right-wing dictator Japanophile conservative on the Korean side, and a right-wing crazy on the Japan side. There's like, and their dads were best friends. So when she became president, I thought this is going to be great for relations. And of course, it seems like Park's almost just been spending her whole tenure trying to prove how much she's not like her dad. And I wondered what happened to those family genes. What happened to those, hey, Japan, it's okay, Japan genes. What happened to that family? And I found out what happened thanks to you.
They resurfaced this week, and Park and Hae's sister, Park Geun-rung.
The ghost of dictator Park lives on, and the older sister.
Yeah. So for those that didn't see the story in the news, this is what happened. So Park's sister said, Japan laid the groundwork for our country's economic development, and we asked Japan to apologize whenever Tokyo has a new prime minister, although its emperor bowed his head and offered an apology repeatedly. That did not play well, of course, domestically in Korea, with opposition leaders calling for an investigation into the inappropriate nature of Park's sister's remarks.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. It was I'm reading that story. Both opposition and the president and the government all stood united in parliament, condemning the sister of the president, who said that Japan ever did anything for the Koreans.
Well, see, and see, you know, there's a lot of truth in what Park Geun-rang has to say. It's like my biggest beef is, you know, Japan, the conservative elements, you know, revising history, whitewashing history, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. I hate the fact that South Korea and China continuously ask Japan to apologize. And the reason for that is that it really weakens their argument, because as soon as you ask Japan to apologize, people from Japan can go out and then bring out the list of 20 plus apologies over the last, you know, decades, and including the one in 2014. The appropriate response would be better, you know, not so much to ask for an apology, but to stop whitewashing history. You know, you have the 93 Kono statement, you have the 95 Maruyama statement, you know, you stick to it and leave it there instead of continuously asking for an apology, because then it weakens your position, it makes you look petty, and it just really softens your position.
But you know, as well, so Japan has also tried, and Koizumi did this, Murayama did this, in the times where very strong apologies were given and there was this mood of reconciliation. And the immediate thing that was jumped to every time was the history issue. And each time the government, with South Korea and at one time with China, agreed to set up a committee of scholars to form basically a unified joint view of history. And those committees, you know, always ended up petering out and not working. And Japan has its issues, but it wasn't always just because of academic freedom issues in Japan that these committees never succeeded at anything. Because you actually have, you know, I mean, Japan for its failings, you know, to teach history, and you know, this is a lame excuse, but the reason that Japanese give for the reason that they don't teach World War II or whatever properly is that, you know, in Japan, history is taught in schools sequentially, from ancient times, you know, from fossils to modern on that time scale, and they literally only get to modern history, like to post-Meiji, the 20th century, in the week before exams, and usually they just skip over and cram. It's not that there's access to all types of information in Japan. It's just that, you know, it's not readily put out there for students, and most people come through the Japanese education system completely ignorant of 20th century history, when that is, of course, a very deep focus of Chinese and Korean, you know, education. But from my perspective, and this is the problem when you get academics to sit down together to agree on a common narrative of history, the narrative of history for both in China and in South Korea is dictated by the government. It's a matter of government policy what the history is. And while there are clearly people in the Japanese government that have a very strong opinion on what the narrative of history should be, and that they're trying to influence in all sorts of ways, you know, through textbook editing and so on. In Japan, the Japanese government does not dictate the narrative of history, and you don't want it to. You know, there is actually, within the very small percentage of the population that is educated about and is interested in 20th century history, there is actually a lot more academic freedom in Japan around that. And that's the issue that they run into when they have these committees with other countries, because these other countries are committed to lines of history which aren't entirely, you know, fair and balanced and open themselves, but they're matters of government policy. So the only objective for South Korea or China in particular to get into one of these committees is to force their policy on history onto the other country, not to have an open debate about, you know, what's a balanced way we can teach this to everybody. And that's where it breaks down, and that's where Europe succeeded. I mean, you know, there are EU textbooks on World War II, you know, which kind of show all sides, but there isn't really the framework for that, which is a shame. And so I don't know, even the history thing,
Oh, but even in South Korea, there's a certain amount of whitewashing that South Korea does with its own domestic history in terms of uprising and softening the dictatorship post post the war and whatnot.
Forget about post-war. I mean, yes, post-war, no question. But with the war itself as well, Korea's got a lot of. I mean, you remember when the Kim Dae-jun's party came on, and they thought that they were going to nail the Grand National Party guys by opening an investigation into who the collaborators were with the Japanese government, and it turned out everybody's dads were collaborators, and they had to shut that down. They had this truth and peace reconciliation thing, and they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle finding out the truth about their own parents. So they got issues. They've got issues on top of issues. They're so committed to a narrative that. A bit like the French resistance, right? That everyone in Korea was against the Japanese thing, and there are a few villainous traitors who had betrayed the people, and the Japanese were purely evil. And that's a narrative that, if you turn that into an inward reflection, that's a very hard narrative to keep stable. So I don't know. It's just like, to me, yes, Japan has to be better on the history thing, and all that completely accepted, but I don't think issues are resolvable. I think getting into the history thing is just it's a circle that it's a whirlpool you can't get out of.
Yeah, and I agree. It's time to finally look at what you're going to do. I mean, and we've seen it throughout Park Geun-hye's administration. Functionally, the government's not Beijing, but Seoul and Tokyo get along fine. The ministers meet. Everyone goes along their normal business. It's just that Abe and Park can't sit in the same room without Obama between them.
That's true. Even with Obama in between, it's awkward and tense.
Let me address Wikipedia's question. So Wikipedia wrote does the South Korean government publicize the apologies from the Japanese emperor and government? My former Korean coworker said that Japan never ever apologized for invading Korea. Now, then we get into nitpicking apologies and statements. So, according to Abe, Japan never invaded Korea. So,
he said the term
hadn't been defined.
Doesn't have a clear definition.
Doesn't have a clear definition.
He didn't say they didn't invade. He just said that term invaded.
Doesn't have a clear definition.
It could mean anything.
So then there's that. The 93 and 95 statements are well known. The big issue with the apologies, and this is where I take exception. To have an apology is to say something and to mean it. And certainly Kono and Murayama meant what they said. But then now you have Abe who's trying to whittle away with what they had to say, and the LDP as well. And
it's assumed that he's trying to whittle that away. He is, every time he's asked that question, he affirms every apology, including the Kono statement and the Murayama statement specifically. He cites those.
He says that. But the perception in Korea is that they're trying to whittle away that.
Yeah. And even in Japan, there's a perception of that.
Yeah. And that's where they take it away from. It's like, if you truly stand by the apologies, you just leave them alone and not try to change any kind of language. And that's where a lot of Koreans have a lot of beef with. But there is a huge perception in Korea that Japan has never apologized, never paid any compensation, never did anything with respect to after the colonial period that ended in 1945. And a big part of that is because between 1965 and 2005, so a period of 40 years, the compensation terms of the bilateral agreement were kept secret from the Korean people.
Yeah, but but again, the people who kept it secret, whenever they get any kind of criticism, they just, those Japanese, they're denying history again.
Yeah.
So on the Japan side, where obviously every person is going to have a slightly nuanced and different view on this as you go through, and what Abe and the more extreme conservatives are also pointing out. Remember, Koizumi was, Murayama, of course, you expect Murayama to apologize for everything and, everything Japan did and might have done, right? He gave a huge apology, but you'd expect that because he was from the Socialist Party, which when he joined that party, it was actually the sister party of the North Korean Workers' Party. He was actually with the sister party that did exchanges with North Korea. Very, very liberal. Liberal not even being even the right term, but when Koizumi, who was a nationalist and a very conservative, very right wing, went to Yasukuni, did everything to piss everybody off, but when he gave very strong apologies, that was kind of something that that was, and he did it with the intent of, okay, let's clean this up for good, as it was done every time. The fact that it still kept coming up, the thing that the conservatives are really against is the perception that Korea and China used the apology and the war issue to basically force Japan to kowtow. It's a way of diplomatically hobbling Japan. And there's a perception based on that being the real intent, that the constant, that it's insincere, which is an extreme view, and I think that is going too far. Because I think people who sincerely who want that do sincerely think that. But there is kind of a perception that, wait a minute, we thought that was the last time, and this is the point that Park Sister made. Does every single Japanese prime minister forever in history now need to offer a new apology? Which is clearly the line that her sister is taking. And while that would be nice and wonderful, at the same time, if that's the standard, then
then you can never move forward. And I've said this before. Korea likes to play the victim card. As long as you continuously fall in this mentality that Japan did this aggressive act and needs to continuously apologize, you surrender yourself to that power, and you still play that role. You give that power up, and you can never move forward either.
Yeah. So again, we have with the anniversary coming up, what of course Korea is very, very loudly, and what they told the minister of the opposition, the head of the opposition when he went over to Korea, the only thing that they care about is, will Abe give a proper full accounting and apology in the 70th anniversary speech? And Abe's given out all the signals that he doesn't want to do another apology. He just wants to do a reflection of the last 70 years and what a great country Japan has been and what a great international citizen it is, and to be, let's go forward to a bright future. But China and Korea have both kind of said, no, we expect another groveling, to be honest, apology.
And I actually have an analyst lined up for next week for the podcast, specifically addressing this issue. And I will be focusing not only on whether or not Abe needs to apologize, but also the difference between how China and South Korea respond to Japan and Southeast Asia, which was also affected by the war.
Indeed. And actually, and what is fascinating, what we have talked about before, is that, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, China and Korea were both completely aligned and both completely rejecting Abe and isolating him and treating him like a pariah and so on. And it's kind of funny. Korea stayed in that position, and China's kind of moved on a little bit. China's always pragmatic, and it's making Korea, look isolated at the moment as well. And that's where testing the realities is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and it is, but I think that's like the one thing that Park can do successfully in Korea, because her administration is such so ineffective. They just declared next Friday, the 14th, a national holiday. Yeah. So that people can actually have a nationalistic pride, go out and hopefully recover a little bit from the MERS scare, since the economy tanked so much.
Nothing to energize you like hatred for another country.
Well, and the story that went with it was kids squirting Japanese World War II soldiers with water guns. Yeah, that's really going to foster better relations between Japan and South Korea when you have kids go out there and shoot the Japanese soldiers.
Yeah, well, good for the economy. I mean, water costs money, right?
Yeah.
At least they're not having military exercises on Dr. again, preparing for war with Japan.
True. Hey, before we leave Japan, I got a question for you. Yeah. So, a while back there was the opium hack in the United States. Yeah. Maybe China's behind it. Recently, it came out that the United States may have been spying on Japan, and I was wondering, what does the average person in Japan do they even care? Because when I spoke with Martin Libicki, he was like, all the governments do it. Hey, it's the corporate espionage that the governments really care about, not so much the state-sponsored spying.
And it came out right. So the content that came out in terms of the specific revelations, from what I read, is that they found out, one, they read all of Prime Minister Abe's communications. They found out about cherry price negotiations, and they were spying on Mitsubishi Heavy Material Industries, which makes airplanes and stuff like that. So probably from a commercial, giving Boeing information or whatever. Nobody gives a shit, honestly. And the fact, what I thought was just the most hilarious illustration of the fact that Japan, has to be seen to be kind of outraged, but really doesn't care. The fact that they asked Joe Biden to look into it.
I saw that. I was like, Minister asked Joe Biden to look into U.S. hacking allegations.
Joe Biden, Detective Joe Biden will be right on it for you. I mean, there's a movie. I can't remember the name of the movie, but there's an old movie with Paul Newman acting as as the president. And there's a scene in the White House where the vice president standing in the corner while everyone's consulting with the president, and the vice president's getting very agitated, and he finally speaks up. Listen, I want to be heard. I want to give my input into this, and everyone kind of looks at him surprised. And Paul Newman, the president, says, "Okay, does anyone in the room want to hear what the vice president has to say?" And no one says anything. So I didn't think so. Okay, let's keep. But nobody cares. Nobody cares. But yes. Yeah. There's been really nothing else Japan-wise. There's been more the Olympic kerfuffle stuff and people.
Oh yes, let's talk about the Olympic logo. Let's talk about the Olympic logo.
Who cares? I mean, it sucks to begin with, right? I mean, it's kind of lame to begin with.
Yeah, see, I was shocked when they unveiled it as a new and different logo than what was put out there in the first place. And then all of a sudden,
they had the wreath in the Tokyo, and
yeah,
lame, but normal and acceptable and fine. But then they pulled out this thing, which is kind of like looks like an art exhibition kind of poster or something. Which it turns out in Belgium, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, for a theater company.
Yeah, I mean, and again, they don't. And I actually believe. I mean, you look at the it's so simple that there is a reasonable probability that maybe there truly was a coincidence. But even so, really, this is the best.
This is the best you can do. Yeah. I don't know about that.
I shouldn't have mentioned to you. This is the problem, actually. We lose the spontaneity when we prepare too much. But I did mention to you in the pre-show as well. There was another story happening at the same time around this.
Oh, yes.
So all of the Olympic, village workers, all of the Olympic staff, they showed this uniform for all of these Olympic village workers. And it's, was announced by the Tokyo government. And they wear these kind of basically like a Swiss yodeling kind of jacket and clothes and kind of this mountain, hat or whatever. And it looks lame. And everybody just came out and said, "Oh my God, please, that's so embarrassing. Like, you're going to lose volunteers just because they won't want to wear that uniform." And a few days later, after this was announced, apparently it might have been a Winter Olympics. It was probably a more recent Olympics. Maybe it was the '88 Olympics, but certainly from Korea, someone said, "Wait a minute, Japan is copying our Olympic uniform from the '80s." And the funniest thing was, when I saw the 2chan reaction to that, all of them said, "Oh my God, they're right. This is copying Japan. This is copying Korea. This is totally unacceptable. We have to get rid of this." Yeah, it was kind of funny.
The 2chan folks and South Koreans working together. That's Japan, it. It's the apocalypse.
And Korean conspiracy theorists, arm in arm. It was nice to see. Actually, maybe that's what they need. Maybe that's what they need to do. They need to rally around hate.
Maybe that'll be. Maybe that will be what spurs the olive branch that gets both nations to.
I would settle
rightfully talking.
I would settle for that. I would take that. So what else we got around Asia, right? I mean, so yes, of course, Korea, Japan always.
Well, let's talk China and the Philippines. Of course, over in The Hague, you have the Philippines concluded their final arguments on whether or not, China's activities in South China Sea, violate UNCLOS, and of course, China.
No, and let's
didn't do anything.
And let's be clear on this, because this is I hate that. I mustn't tie everything back to Korea-Japan relations, but Japan has always said, "Hey, look, if you're so confident that Dokdo is Korean territory, let's go to The Hague, arm in arm, and let's go and get an objective ruling on it." Which, of course, no, there's nothing to debate. We're not going to The Hague. And
that's the same debate with Senkaku and Diaoyu, though.
Sorry.
That's the same reason why Japan won't take Senkaku to the Hague as well.
China's never asked to take Senkaku to The Hague, and it would be interesting if they did. But China doesn't recognize, because again, if you open that can of worms, then you've got the whole South China Sea and everything else. They haven't tried, and they should. You could argue that they should. But Japan has put that openly on the table. But the whole point is that, as you know, The Hague, it's arbitration between parties who mutually agree to arbitration. So, you can go there and do a big song and dance about, on your side, but if the other side doesn't willingly show up or accept the results of the arbitration, then it's pointless. And that's what China does with all of these things.
Right.
So basically, but what is unusual is that, when Japan is send out that invitation, but when the other side said they're not going, Japan's never actually followed through and actually done the whole case with the other party in absentia. So in a way, it's theater, right? I mean, of course, Philippines knows that China's not going to show up and there's not going to be a result from this, but they're just going through the exercise, just to needle. I mean, because they're not, it's probably the most visible way that they can oppose China.
Well, yeah, what's expected to happen is that the Court of Arbitration will rule in favor of the Philippines.
Will they actually rule? Can they rule without the other party accepting the arbitration?
Well, okay, so this is going against UNCLOS, right, which China is a party to. So it's not so much the code of conduct, but UNCLOS. Yeah. So what this is right now is that, does the Court of Arbitration have jurisdiction to even hear the case?
Right.
So that's what they're hearing now. It's expected that they will, based on the mountain of information that the Philippines provided. Then next month, like 2-3 weeks after the decision, they're actually going to formally hear the case. And that is when we'll see whether or not China chooses to participate in the actual case or not. And they won't, which then brings up another issue for China, is what their standing will be on the international platform, because this will be seen as an affront to the whole process. And if they choose to ignore this, then they could risk other issues as well.
I mean, China's made its reaction pretty clear when it sent 10,000 boats with sand out into the South China Sea, and now they're building, all of these military resorts on these islands. And that is, I always say to my Chinese friends as well, the international legal system is set up, weighted against China. That's not just a paranoid delusion of China. China, the international system of nations was set up when in the last 5,000 years, China was at its most low ebb and most taken advantage of stage. And that's the default setting that it's supposed to accept for international order, based on, honestly, a system that was set up by colonial nations. And so they just say, screw yours, screw the system. It's not right. And we're just going to take back those islands. They do belong to us. And we're just going to muscle in basically one by one. But I did love in ASEAN how they said the ASEAN nation said, let's all do a multilateral framework for just agreeing to not make trouble around this. And China said, if you all team together, there will be consequences.
Right. Shambro was asking about UNCLOS. It's UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas.
That's right.
That's what it stands for. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The way that China behaves about this, and that's been my biggest gripe, is that everyone's been so slow to react to have China, to kind of push China away, or to directly confront China on their activities. And in next week's podcast as well, I'll have an analyst on as well to discuss what you just said. Is this, essentially China trying to reclaim its past glory, being more assertive now?
Which it unquestionably is. And this is why you should all obviously subscribe to the podcast, because this stuff is all explained regularly in more detail. But they're making their diplomatic position, which is very clear, which is la 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 la, look at my island. That's pretty much it, and that's a very effective strategy. The whole thing.
Which is just sad for the rest of the world, because we've seen it time and time again. You wait, and then it's too late.
Yep. But this is the thing. The international system, the international system of nations relies upon every mutual respect and mutually shared values and laws about recognition of, where these boundaries are and what the international system is. And this is the international system which didn't accept communist China into that system of nations until 1972. And China was happily outside of, was happily a pariah outside of that system, controlling 1/5 of the world's population that entire time. So, again, I can kind of the chip on the shoulder and the kind of, your laws mean nothing to me. You're right. That's a recipe for anarchy, which would break down the entire international system, and why I reject it. But I kind of get their point. And their point is very effective with, you know, the way that they're going about it. I mean, in the end of the day, we are going to be in a situation very quick. I mean, it's astounding how quickly they've been able to actually impose their reality. You know, we're in a place where 5 years from now, that's going to be absolutely irreversible. You know, whatever Hague decision you have on anything, it's not going to be reversible anymore. Just like Korea and Dokdo, it's a fortified island now. At the end of the day, that's real politic, and by that system, any powerful country can just go grab whatever it wants, and that's not a good thing.
Right.
But yeah. But it is interesting. I mean, I remember reading about the debates. Hillary Clinton, when she was foreign secretary, actually, I was talking about the Senkaku issue with the Chinese foreign minister in Hawaii. And do you remember they had this? She was kind of saying, you can't just go claiming other countries' territory, and they were like, why not? They were like, you know, and they were literally they were kind of rhetorically challenging her. And I remember reading the account of this thing. It's like, just because you know, so where does it end? Where do the boundaries go? Well, so what's China? Well, anything we say is China is China. So what, you could say Hawaii is part of China? And they said, well, yeah, we could. I was just reading the discussion. It was kind of eye-opening, but yeah, they were kind of making an emphatic point that the reality that everyone is telling them they have to accept is a reality that's based fundamentally on an injustice towards them in their perception. And, you know, it's kind of, I don't know. I think the South China Sea is gone. It really is. I mean, there'll be moral victories in the Hague and all that sort of thing. The only thing that China, or the only two things that China really wants that it can't have and that it's going to focus on next, are Taiwan and the Senkaku Islands. Probably reverse order of that.
Yeah.
You talk about doing something to embolden them. You know, this is going to get them. You know, and this is where America's going to have to show real commitment to the region.
Yeah, and see, that's the, I guess, the scary part.
Yeah.
They've come out and said, you know, if there's movement on Senkaku, we are bound by treaty. It's under the security umbrella, and we will respond.
But when Donald Trump becomes president, I mean, is he going to be that committed to the defense of the Japanese?
Well, I mean, I would say that he would have no choice.
Well, you'd hope so. But there again, but I think Japan is getting nervous about this, and that's why they're passing this security bill as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. On the one hand, China's being kind of quiet and kind of more reasonable. On the one hand, diplomatically and politically, while at the same time, physically and militarily, they're being very forceful. But yeah, and of course, China's also had through the last month this ongoing. And let's be clear,
the market issue.
The market issue? Oh, of course. Well, the markets have collapsed. But even before that, there's also clearly yes, it's an anti-corruption drive, but any anti-corruption drive in China is basically, you know, they select their targets. So they could probably get anyone they want on an anti-corruption drive. So it's clearly a purge that's happening at the moment.
Oh, yeah. No, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So, you know, they've got a collapsing market and a purge and a feel-good story about the South China Seas. But yeah, a lot going on there.
Yeah, so I mean, those are pretty much the main stories from the last month.
Yeah. So what's coming up? What will we be talking about, other than, of course, the wonderful peacemaking epoch statement of Abe that everyone finally accepted as the final chapter on history? And
well, hopefully, in the next few days, we'll have some final words on Malaysian airline flight 370, if the debris is actually from that plane or not. So they're conducting the investigation Wednesday in France, and hopefully next day or even before
this
then.
week.
Yeah. Which would be great, because hopefully they'll be able to find more information and finally figure out what the heck happened to that flight.
Yeah,
and move forward from there. But those are a lot of the big ones. I mean, the other thing that rights groups were very upset about, of course, was the lifting of Malaysia off the lowest tier of the human rights trafficking.
Now, why is that again? So this is to do with the whole Rohingya issue, or what was the story with that? Why were they on the list so high, and why is it controversial?
Well, they're on the lowest list, and you know, I'm not really sure why they were lifted. Some people think it has to do with TPP. Let me read you this quote from Phil Robertson, who is the deputy director with the Asia division over at Human Rights Watch. He says, Malaysia's record on stopping trafficking in persons is far from sufficient to justify this upgrade from Washington. Migrants are being trafficked and abused with impunity. Rohingya victims' bodies are being pulled from shallow graves at the border, and convictions are down this year compared to last year. So how can the State Department call this progress? The report's Malaysia discussion is full of what can only be called the State Department's fudge factor, a triumph of diplomatic writing, trumpeting process rather than real impact. This upgrade is more about the TPP and the United States trade politics than anything Malaysia did to combat human trafficking over the past year. But sadly, this act... Well,
Malaysia isn't in the TPP.
Well, it's all focusing on trade to the region, so maybe not Malaysia specifically. But I mean, remember the TPP covers 12 nations right now. So and more.
Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. I'm wrong about that. Sorry, Malaysia is in the negotiations.
Yeah.
I'm
so
sorry.
I mean.
Okay, so maybe that is part of it.
Yeah. So I mean that was the Phil Robertson's take on it, and there was even discussion of lifting Thailand up off the third tier as well.
Yeah.
I think they can't do that. I think they wanted to do that, but I don't think they can because of Prayut Chanacha.
Sorry, what you mean the
junta leader, the general.
Yeah. Well, right. Well, and the fact is, I mean, I know from going into Thailand myself that you have to assume that there's human trafficking going on when you see that all the construction is being done by Burmese migrants living in tin shacks beside these luxury, places that they're helping to build. And they are, they are the engine of all of that building and growth and the economy in Thailand. They rely upon, refugee labor. On the upside for Malaysia, at least it's not Qatar, but that's horrible. About the only positive thing. It still is astounding that they're going to be having the Soccer World Cup there, and how many people have died building the stadiums for that.
Horrible.
Oh, but that said,
and if you're Canadian and out of the country more than 5 years, you can no longer vote.
Oh, well, sucks to be you, but now you know how I feel, because New Zealand eliminates your right to vote after 3 years, and I haven't been able to vote since 99. I haven't been able to vote in 17 years. So, yeah. And I regret the last vote that I made. But, I think New Zealand, probably Canada and New Zealand are the same in that there are countries with very high immigrant inflow and outflow. And there is a mentality in New Zealand that we should reward and be as open as possible to new migrants who come, and we allow permanent residents who are not citizens to vote in New Zealand, at the same time as penalize people who run out from the country, because we like a sieve. We have the same population coming in as going out the whole time. So there's a view that if you leave us, screw you can't vote, which, sure, and I don't pay tax there anymore if you make that a linkage, but at the same time, I mean, it used to be because Kiwis used to go off to Britain and there was no way to even find out what was going on back home. But in this day and age, I read the New Zealand newspapers every day. So I feel a bit disenfranchised, which isn't just a feeling. I guess that's actually what's happened to me. But yes, sorry, Canadian people, but I know how you feel.
So there you have the news.
The news, that is the news. I hope that was good. I sampled your voice a little bit, and I put it on my turntables for my music in the show, and it was good. I actually did. People were saying I need to get Victor to do the same thing, but the sound quality on your podcast audio compared to the YouTube sound was so incomparable. I couldn't use anything else. I guess just for the wrap up, though, do we have any requests for samples or sound bites from the voice over here? If not, we're going to wrap up. But yes, it's been great catching up with you again. Remember, first Wednesday every month, we are going to be catching up for What's Up Asia. And yes, I mean, we've got one of the best, no question, one of the best and one of the most followed podcasts on Asian news with Steve Miller here. And and it's nice to talk about something that goes a little bit beyond Japan and to understand how everything fits together in the region. So it looks like quite, and there's a 40-second lag with this, but it's been a good show. So I think we can wrap it up there.
Super.
So, thank you again, sir.
My pleasure. And I will, Did I miss a plug for a September YouTube? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, you did miss the plug. Thank you, because Victor told me just before I was on the phone before I started this. He said, don't forget to mention the Hanami is 1 month from today. Not the Hanami, the YouTube party. September 5th. September 5th, Roppongi. All the information's on Facebook, and you can find it from my Facebook page. I'll actually, I think the information is in the video information, but if it's not, I'm going to put it there. But that's right, Roppongi, there is an RSVP, which helps because that makes sure we get enough staff for the place and we get, everything set up right. But it is the best YouTube party of the year. Hundreds, over 100 anyway. Come, we fill up a nice bar in Roppongi, and people go off. And last year, everyone went to a foam party afterwards. Other years we've gone off to karaoke or whatever, but it is an awesome. It's weatherproof, and we've got a great sports bar that has screens all over the place that we play our own YouTube videos on all night. While you get to mingle and meet your favorite YouTubers. Are you going?
I don't know. I'm switching schools, so I will not get my schedule until I think Thursday or Friday before school starts, which is the week before the gathering. So I don't know if I will physically have enough time to get out there for the weekend.
And a lot of people are in that situation. There's a lot of people in the same situation as you, actually. But certainly, if you can come, if you're going to come to Tokyo, don't come in August because it sucks. We've just had 35-degree plus days, 6 days in a row, and we're going to have another one tomorrow.
Speaking of that, I saw the news today. Over 11,000 people have been taken to the hospital for heat-related illness, and since July 27th. That's incredible.
Yes. It isn't just the imagination. It's not purely global warming. We've had all these typhoons that have been going under Japan and dragging all this Philippine hot weather up to Japan. But also, like, Tokyo's got this crazy heat island effect. Tokyo is so big and so concreted, and so there's so much lack of shade, and everyone's got their air conditioners on full that pump out heat. And it just means that Tokyo is like, I used to research this. The air temperature in Tokyo in summer is like at day and at night is 5 degrees hotter than the average temperatures 25 years ago. So, talking about 10 times the speed of global warming, climate change happening over Tokyo.
You're preaching to the choir here. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. You just bake out there.
Oh, but here, it's like you freeze in winter, and I guess you do in Arizona as well. But oh man, no, it really is unbearable. So don't come to Japan in August. I really can't. Don't come to Tokyo anyway. Go to Hokkaido. It's lovely up there. North Korea is probably lovely this time of year as well. I don't know. It was very nice in Dalian where I was. It was about 30 degrees, 28 degrees. It was nice. But here, no. It must be hot there as well.
What?
It must be hot there as well.
Well, we have the same temperature here as like 37 with the heat index today. It was about the same when we were down in Hong Kong, a little bit cooler, but not too much.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it will end soon, but not too soon. It's still going to keep going for at least another week by the looks of it here. So stay cool, as I know you do, Captain Picard. And
I shall try.
And yes, I'm definitely going to be showing no mercy with the air conditioning until reasonable weather is reassumed, which isn't going to happen at least until September. But come in September, if you're going to come to Japan anytime soon, make sure you're here. Make sure you're in Tokyo, from wherever you are. People come from all over Asia, from other countries, from America, from Europe. Come for September 5th because this is the best YouTube gathering in North Asia, dare I say, because I know there isn't one in China. And yes, it is the party to be at. So September 5, mark it in your calendars, and thank you for the reminder, Charge Fire. And see you guys again soon. So peace.